So I recently made a video called WoW Players' Thoughts on Final Fantasy XIV, in which I began the video saying that it was not a WoW bashing video. It was never meant to be a WoW versus Final Fantasy XIV thing. I just wanted to talk about Final Fantasy XIV since I love the game, and playing an MMO after playing WoW for so many years was really interesting. I never thought the video would get over 10,000 views, and am flabbergasted how great almost all the comments have been. So if you watched it, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you so much for all your responses. Some of the comments, though, I noticed, went a very different direction than I did. Some of them went on a long list of grievances of WoW sucks, and everything associated in it is the worst thing ever, while at the same time singing the praises of Final Fantasy XIV. So I thought I'd have some fun trying to rile up players from both games. Let's bash WoW and Final Fantasy XIV and make as many over-the-top generalizations as we can. Here we go. WoW characters look awful. The cartoony proportions and outdated textures just don't hold up by 2020 standards. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy XIV characters look great, but despite having so many options in hair color, every character somehow looks the same and ununique. Final Fantasy XIV's combat is slow. 2.5 second global cooldown and a server tick rate that means I'll die from an AoE that didn't hit me 3 seconds after it went off. WoW mechanics are largely so weak it doesn't matter if I dodge them, making lots of the game just tank and spank while looking at my other monitor. WoW's story is so disjointed and disappointing, I don't know why I bother to remember characters' names anymore. Everyone says Final Fantasy XIV's story is amazing, but then we solve every problem in the plot by just kicking the bad guy's ass in a trial. The bad guy has a super powerful weapon that has everyone pooping their pants, and the player character just kills it. Great story. Gear in WoW is so complex, we need a supercomputer to sim it, while Final Fantasy XIV is so boring it's on its third expansion, and the ultimate weapon we're gonna grind for is just a little bit more weapon damage and strength. Oh, and your gear is gonna scale down anyway for 95% of the content. Yay? Gear in WoW is too easy to get, and gear in 14 you get by buying it from one vendor, and then you go to another vendor to spend tokens you don't remember getting on an item, then bring both of those to a third vendor to trade them in for the item you actually wanted. And by the way, there's no indication anywhere in the game that this is how any of it works, so I hope you read the patch notes. WoW is for neckbeards, 14 is for weebs. Both games have some questionable RPers we don't like to talk about. Look, I think being critical of a game is healthy and needed to improve it and make the experience better overall. But let's be careful our hyperbole doesn't go so far we become absurd. My pal Sayo can tell you all about the rants I've had about both games, but I also think it's important to remember that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. It can be really frustrating when something you love changes, or perhaps you change and it doesn't. Both games are fun. Both have their problems, but remember that frustration is there because you care. Oh, and about that whole WoW versus Final Fantasy XIV thing, I'll let you in on a little secret. You're allowed to like both